Hello everybody, it's me GhostCritic. Thank you for joining me for another instalment in my monthly look at all things pop cultureness that is not, or I try not for it to be, comic book related. Yes, it's the May edition of this month. I have been mostly. A little insight, a little look at what I've been watching, what I've been listening to, and what I've been reading over the past month. This month, my watching has been somewhat historic. My listening, I'm listening to people talk and talk and talk. And reading, I just looked at the pretty pictures so far. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So, let's crack on and let's have a look at what I've been... So, going through my ear holes this past month, I'm back on the old podcasts again, the chatter, the talk, as I go to and from work on the bus. And I'll do a little kind of music thing at the end of this. I'll talk about that in a few moments. But there are 3 podcasts that I've been listening to lately, and they are very different, but entertaining nonetheless. And I'm gonna start with the one that's quite out there, and one that I don't know how many people will actually even give this a go, but give it a chance, and you will probably be at least chortling occasionally. It's called Whimsically Volatile, and it stars Katya and Craig. Now, Katya is a drag queen. I've had a fascination with drag queens for a long time, even before the whole RuPaul Drag Race thing came along. Something you don't know about me, but do know now. It's not that I want to dress up as a drag queen, that's never kind of really crossed my mind. Maybe once, to just for a laugh, but it wouldn't be anything that I want to do every week like these outstanding entertainers that we see on our TV every week. But Katya has been on the show of RuPaul's Drag Race in the main series and the offshoot All Stars. She didn't win either of them. I think she was robbed in All Stars 2 because she had grown and matured so much as a drag queen from her first season in the main series. But it's just her and I guess her long-suffering co-host, who has to basically put up with her constant digressions, her nonsensical tellings of stories, her ad-libs. But the great thing about Katya and Brian, who I guess plays Katya, is that he came from a very, very dark place. He was a drug addict. He had mental health issues. And he talks about it very, very candidly in a lot of the episodes. But it's done not in a very particular serious way, although the topic is obviously very serious. Unfortunately, he's managed to come out the other side of that dark tunnel and become a better person, and is able to enjoy his life, what he has, and the fact that he doesn't have things that in the past he would have craved. But it's fun, it's light. There's a Monty Python-esque vibe to it at times. Yes, it's very gay. It is very gay. So if you're kind of put off by that kind of thing, then it might not really be for you. But it's just pure fun. I often find myself laughing on the bus and people looking at me a little bit strangely, thinking, what the hell is he listening to? But I love it, and I always anticipate another great episode. And he has guest stars and the drag queens on, other people from within the business of drag, so it's not just the two of them chatting back and forth, but it's great stuff nonetheless. Now, going from kind of that extreme to, I guess, they're very much the other way, armchair expert with Dax Shepard. Now, I had no idea who Dax Shepard was, but I came across the podcast and I was scrolling down all the people he's spoken to, and for the most part, I had no clue who most of these was. They look all Americans. They're all friends of his within the biz, because apparently Dax Shepard is a movie star, or was a movie star. Maybe you people out there know him more than I do and watched a lot of his movies and probably think he's terrible. I don't know. But with these kind of things, it's interesting because they talk about the entertainment industry and how each of them have come to it, and how they've dealt with the spotlight of fame, and how they've managed to traverse their way through that and come out the other end being kind of normal, or at least normalish type people. And as I said, for the most part, there's loads of episodes, but for the most part, I don't know a lot of them. But when I see people that I recognise, he had the guy out of Scrubs, is it Brad somebody or something? Brad, I can't remember. It's the main guy out of Scrubs. It's also, God, I'm forgetting all these names now. The main guy out of Community. He's got a Netflix show now, and the Netflix show is his name. Oh God, I can't remember. But it's a very entertaining and a lot of the times informative, because again, Dax Shepard has gone through the ringer with alcoholism, and again he talks about it very candidly. You find this a great deal in podcasts, especially from quote unquote famous people, that once they get on these podcasts, they are very free and easy with talking about their life and what they've been through, which I don't think they would normally be so much revealing in, say, a TV show. And perhaps because I just don't know who this guy really is. I've not really looked to see what movies he was in, or if I've seen any of them, but maybe his career as a movie star is at a lull, so he can do this podcast, but I don't know. But still, worth a go. And then finally, on a very British tinge, is Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. Richard Herring was he still is, just not, I guess, as popular as he was back in the 90s. For a long time a stand-up comedian, he and other British comedians, he's been in a lot of sketch shows and a lot of those kind of comedy panel show games, and he does this weekly podcast where he invites, for the most part, fellow comedians who he's either worked with or had an appreciation for. And much like the Dax Shepard one, he has a lot of podcasts that you can go back to and listen. And again, I'd say probably about 60 or 70% of it I do actually know the people, and I'm interested in listening to those. But the other 30% I'm like, who are you? Or I'm not quite sure whether I even want to listen to you. There was a great one just a couple of weeks ago. He's tried to get Brian Blessed of Flash Gordon fame, amongst many other things. He's tried to get him on the show for years, and finally got him on there, and it is a spectacular podcast where Brian Blessed basically just takes it over. Richard Herring has this way of not impolitely, but he interrupts a lot of his guests with his kind of own stories, rather than the interview technique of you're asking your guests a question. And it works. It's not improper, it's not impolite, it's not rude. It's the flow of the podcast. But it's just a great comedy-esque podcast that I think if you're into the whole Brit side of pop culture and want to know more about the comedians that we have over here, it's definitely worth a try. Now, I said, because it's been a while since I've spoken about music, and don't even know if I'm really going to speak about a particular artist either, but do you remember the days when you used to make mixtapes? I used to love making mixtapes. All my favourite songs on one tape, or making tapes for friends or loved ones. And that's why I love Spotify, and why it's one of those few streaming services that I will pay for, because I don't think you can do this if you're only a free user. And I make a ton of playlists over on my Spotify account. I have a series of playlists basically called Let's Make a Playlist, and they come in themes. There's a funk one, there's an 80s one, there's a disco one, there's an indie one, there was even a Christmas one. Obviously I was making one up for Christmas to play in the background. And then I will do what other ones do I have? I have one called Synth Sounds, and it's all my favourite 80s electronic music. There's a playlist of music made by drag queens. Yes, those drag queens back again. Some of my favourite songs and I've called it Through the Ages. It's my favourite songs from like the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s and the 2000s. And my favourite one, because I am pop's bitch, called Pop Perfection, and it's just a load of pop music. It will be of no interest to all you hardened rockers out there, but I love my pop music, as I said. But I just love making these playlists up, being reintroduced to music that I haven't heard in years, because as you add to these playlists from stuff you just remember, it gives you recommendations at the bottom of your playlist to add to it. So I'm like, oh my god, I can't remember the last time I heard such and such a song, and you add that to the playlist, and it brings back such kind of nostalgic memories of when you were first listening to it. I wish I was sponsored by Spotify, because, you know, I could talk about how great Spotify is for quite some time. Like I said, it's one of the few streaming services that I'm quite happy to pay £10 a month to use and get the most out of it. Do you lot still make playlists up? Do you even make mixtapes up? I mean, I know who's got a tape player, you know, who's got tapes? Oh, I bet Scott has. I bet you have, Scott. Let me know down in the comments section below. So what have I been watching over the last month of May? Well, as I said at the top, it's been a little bit historic. I've been watching a couple of documentaries and a period drama. Let's start off with the two documentaries. Let's preface this by saying I do watch a lot of documentaries, mostly because I think I'm a bit thick, and I'm not really aware of of what goes on around me in the larger sense of the world. Let's be honest here, it doesn't often interest me, or I don't seem to think it affects me, though I know in the grand scheme of things it does. And plus, I don't have any short-term memory, I don't have any long-term memory, I basically don't have any memory. I put it down to old age. And so I don't have that ability that I know so many people, especially here on YouTube, who can soak up knowledge and store it. and just like that with facts and, oh yes, I've watched that, and a whole plethora of dialogue comes out of their mouth, and I'm just like, how the hell do you do that and keep a 9-to-5 job and remember everything that you've got to do there every week and every day and every month and every year of your life? But that's another thing. So these first two documentaries that I watched, I was clearly aware of the first one. The second one, I had no idea what it was about, but it's fascinating. The first one I want to talk about is, and they're both on Netflix, at least they're on Netflix UK. The first one is Bobby Kennedy for President. Now, I don't think there's anyone that doesn't know who Bobby Kennedy is, and that he was assassinated just like his older brother was before him. And there's a huge load of conspiracies surrounding both those assassinations. But what I really like about this documentary, at least so far, because I have the last episode to go, and I think that's where all the conspiracy stuff will come into. But the first few episodes have been a very in-depth but entertaining look at Bobby Kennedy's life, from a kind of young aspiring politician, almost in the shadow of his older brother, a wonderful family man, a voice eventually you felt for the people. But within all these episodes that I've seen, it's been interesting to me to watch and hear people's feelings and reactions to Bobby Kennedy from when they first were introduced to him in their life to eventually working for him and being amazed at what he tried to achieve in such a short time. The people right at the very beginning of the first episode, they're very harsh about him. They saw him very much as not so much a scheming politician, but a very driven one at any length, almost. Though we never really get to see what these lengths are. This seems to be a young man interested in politics, and I don't think he could really get out of that given his whole family, and doing the best he could through his life. And there's no doubt that he tried in his own way to kind of heal and bring together a lot of disparate people within America from that time. I mean, it's obvious the blacks and the whites and the division between the two is just appalling to behold. We like to think that we're in more enlightened times these days, but are we really? Are we? And of course there's that idea that if he wasn't assassinated, how far could Bobby Kennedy have gone? What much more could he have achieved if he had lived? And that's always the tragedy, not just because he was murdered in such a terrible way. I mean, any murder is terrible. But the fact that he had so much potential and he seemed to be of the people. I think him and obviously his elder brother are held so, they're seen so much, recognisably so, because of what they wanted to do and what they wanted to achieve in their lives. And here in the UK, I'm trying to think of someone that you could relate that to, and for the life of me, I can't. Perhaps someone in the UK can tell me of a politician, of a prime minister that kind of mirrors the Kennedys, because I don't think you can, because I don't think they have that same drive, or maybe that same commitment in trying to achieve things that will make the world better rather than just throwing soldiers and guns and bombs at things. But it's a weird thing to say, but I was thoroughly entertained by this documentary, and just with kind of stock footage and insights into his life, his family life also, and just the outpouring of emotion that you saw from his assassination. I just remember the scene because his body was moved from the city he was in by train, and up to I can't remember where he was going to be laid, but it was, you know, where the rest of the Kennedys are settled, are rested, and it was just as this train was going by, all these people of all races, all colours, all you know, rich people, poor people, they were just lining the sides of the tracks to show their respect, and it was just amazing. It was very emotional. I was not ready for that at all, and it just shows, you know, how little I know of what happened afterwards, but definitely recommended for a watch. Now, the other one I knew nothing about. It still blows my mind, and I'm only kind of like 2 or 3 episodes in. I don't know how much more there is to come, but it's called Wild Wild Country, and it centres around this, I guess you'd call them a commune. Some people would call them a cult, but it started off, as they always seem to do, in India, headed by this guru, and everyone travelled over to India to hear him speak, to be part of this huge gathering of people together, like-minded hippies. But the idea of this guru, it wasn't so much abstinence. You could still have material things. The way I kind of heard it, you could still, you know, have sex and drink and eat, you know, as you would normally, as long as you brought that idea of love and peace and not harming your fellow man. Well, eventually this commune cult comes over to America. They buy this huge expanse of what is basically barren land, and they build a community. They build a small town, and the neighbouring villages are not happy about it, and in a way I can see why, because obviously they show some kind of rather shocking footage of things that go on in this commune, and through the clips from the trailer I've seen of it, we're going to get the army coming in. The moment they are weaponizing themselves, but when you push kind of all that away, it's amazing to see what they actually did. I still don't know how they did it actually financially, because they literally have built themselves a small town from this barren ground land, and I don't get where all the money's come from. But it's interesting hearing the people that were part of it. They're getting interviewed now in the present day, and they're older and they're looking back on it. And it's interesting to hear their own personal stories along the way. I am engrossed in this, and I'm so waiting to find out how this all ends, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of surprises along the way. So if you're into the kind of cults of the kind of 60s, 70s hippie movement, that's certainly an interesting documentary to start watching. If anyone's watched it, I'd like to, you know, hear your point of views on those, as well as the whole Bobby Kennedy for President, and indeed the period drama that I watched it's a new series just recently put up on Netflix called The Alienist. Set in the 19th century, late 19th century New York. It follows this, I guess he's a psychologist, Laszlo Kreisler, played by Daniel Bruhl. Now, I came to Daniel Bruhl back in probably about 2004, 2005, when I saw one of his foreign language films, because he's of Spanish origin, if you believe this, and it was called The Educators. Now, I can't actually remember a lot about it, but that's where I first knew about Daniel Bruhl. Obviously, people know him very recently, I guess, as he played Zemo in Captain America Civil War. Along with him, we have Luke Evans, our Welsh boy, Dungard. You'll probably know Luke Evans from Beauty and the Beast. If you've got kids, I'm sure they've dragged you or made you buy that film, the live action version of it, with Hermione of the Harry Potter movies. But he was also in High Rise, great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's got that low-key fella in as well, if that'll drag you to that movie more. But watch High Rise, good film. And also Dakota Fanning, who plays the female part of this group that is hunting down, investigating into a serial murderer, or perhaps murderess, we don't know yet, who's killing off young boys who work in basically brothels, dressing up as women. That they don't particularly look like women, but they dress up as women. But it's very dark, it's very gritty, it's very gripping. I do like a dark period drama, none of this flouncy nonsense of Pride and Prejudices and Howard's Ends and all that kind of stuff. We need the grit, the murder, the corruption of New York police force back in the 19th century, but highly recommended TV show. I think I'm about 3, maybe 4 episodes in, but I'm loving it and excited for the end of it. And let's see if we can get a new series out of it. But it's a great character piece as well, seeing how especially these three navigate their way through life. Laszlo Kreisler being a psychologist, he's very abrupt, he's very blunt, he basically says what's on his mind. And then you get the Luke Evans character, who's a bit of a playboy. He's a journalist. He does the drawings for the newspapers because there wasn't time. Photography wasn't a huge thing in those days, or at least not. You can't bring the camera equipment out to a murder scene. And then Dakota Fanning plays the female lead. She has a job within the police force, working for the main guy, the chief of police, commissioner. And obviously for that time, for her to have such a position is kind of frowned upon, because it's not seen, or wasn't seen, as a woman's job. That was a man's job. But she's trying to kind of hold her own in this man's world and keep strong and trying not to come across as this frail, fragile character. Women's rights. But great stuff, lovely cinematography on it, very moody, interesting soundtrack going on in the background. Definitely worth a watch. And finally, what have I been reading for the last month? Well, not a lot really, apart from the obvious weekly comic books that I pick up and the backlog or back issues that seem to never go down. So I got bought a present from my other half last month, an impromptu present that just because they love me. And they really do love me, because this is quite an expensive book. It was on my Amazon wishlist and it's been on there for a while, and I was just kind of saving up cash for a big splurge on my Amazon wishlist, but they got there before me. And let's just show you. It's this big behemoth, Ditko Unleashed, an American Hero. It's one of those really well-produced IDW kind of retrospects of a creator. And I just feel that if you are into comics, and not just in like a passing phase, I think you need to know about what came before, who the greats were, who made the comic book industry what it is today. The two obvious names that come to mind are Jack Kirby and this guy here, Steve Ditko. And I haven't really, to be honest, got a lot of Ditko work. I've got kind of bits and bobs of his kind of short stories and artwork from like the Charlton years, but none of his Marvel work, surprisingly. But this is another of those fantastic productions from IDW that go through his creative life chronologically, showing off you know, panelled pages. There's some little kind of here we go, stuff to read in there as well. I was actually a little worried that I'd bought, or you know, my other half had bought the wrong version, because for some reason, so for instance, I don't know how clearly you're going to see this, but I'll just explain. The writing here on this page, all this down here is in English, but all this down here, which I'm presuming is the same as there, is in what looks like Spanish. And it's just a bit weird to me. I don't know if Ditko had some special affinity to the Spanish people, but it's there. And maybe it's just the way it was produced, or maybe this is a version for the Spanish people. But there are some great kind of uncoloured, you know, the inking and the artwork that you see in those great huge artists' editions. And let's be honest, I just haven't had the opportunity to read this yet, but I've had a great time looking through all the magnificent artwork and all the covers in here. You can't see that very well, but he's quite famous for his Mr. A work. But yes, I am actually really looking forward to going through all this. Wow, just got not seen that one yet, but still, double page spread, a rum big splash page. But yes, that's what I'll eventually get round to properly reading, but for now I'm just gawking and enjoying and trying not to drool all over the great artwork of Mr. Ditko. And that's it for me this week, and indeed this month. Hopefully I will have the next month, this June, up on time, the last Friday of this month. And you'll get to hear everything I've been watching, listening to and reading for the month of June. Thank you for watching. If you're new to my channel and you don't want to miss out on any other videos that I do, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, give this video a big thumbs up and comment down below. Say hello. Let me know if you've watched, listened or read any of the things that I did in the month of May. Take care everybody. Bye bye.